ABC General Hospital Spoilers reveal that the quiet tension that had begun to coil around Port Charles was no longer subtle. It moved beneath the surface of conversations, inside the careful glances people exchanged in crowded rooms, and most of all within the mind of Ava, whose growing unease had become impossible to ignore. What had once appeared to be a simple mystery surrounding a young woman named Delilah was slowly transforming into something far more dangerous. The truth was beginning to surface in fragments, and each new piece carried the same disturbing implication. Delilah was not merely another stranger passing through the city. She was tied to Ava in a way that neither of them could fully escape, and the revelation that Ava might in fact be Delilah's mother was threatening to unravel everything Ava had spent years trying to control. For Ava, control had always been survival. Every decision she made was calculated, every alliance carefully constructed, every emotional weakness buried beneath a surface of elegance and composure. She had built her life on the belief that secrets could remain hidden if she was disciplined enough to protect them. Yet the reappearance of Delilah had cracked that illusion. The young woman carried something in her presence that Ava could not ignore, an unsettling familiarity that stirred memories Ava had long forced herself to forget. It was not simply the resemblance in Delilah's eyes, or the strange instinct Ava felt whenever their paths nearly crossed. It was the growing realization that fate had returned someone Ava once believed she had successfully erased from her life. The idea that Delilah might be her daughter was not a possibility Ava was prepared to face. Years earlier, Ava had made a decision she believed was necessary, a choice that had demanded ruthless clarity. In her mind, distancing herself from that past had been an act of protection. She had convinced herself that abandoning that part of her life was the only way to secure the future she wanted. But the return of Delilah threatened to expose not only that buried truth, but the darker motivations behind it. If the connection between them became public, it would destroy the carefully balanced life Ava had created. Worse, it would expose the cold calculation behind a decision that had shaped both of their destinies. Delilah, however, was not the fragile figure Ava might have expected. She had grown into someone sharp, observant, and deeply suspicious of the forces moving around her. Her arrival in Port Charles had not been accidental, and the more she uncovered about the city's powerful figures, the more certain she became that someone had manipulated the path of her life long before she understood the truth. There was a growing fury inside her, fueled by years of unanswered questions. Every piece of information she uncovered only strengthened her belief that the past she had been denied was far more complicated than anyone wanted to admit. That suspicion inevitably led her toward Ava. At first, the connection was subtle, little more than fragments of rumors and circumstantial evidence. But as Delilah followed those threads deeper into the hidden layers of Port Charles society, the possibility that Ava had played a role in her past began to feel unavoidable. Delilah did not yet know the full truth, but she felt the presence of a lie that had shaped her entire life. The closer she moved toward exposing it, the more she sensed resistance gathering around her. For Ava, the danger was escalating faster than she could contain it. Each time Delilah's name surfaced in a conversation or investigation, Ava felt the walls closing in. Her instincts told her that the situation was no longer something she could quietly manipulate from a distance. Delilah was searching for answers, and the more determined she became, the greater the risk that Ava's past decisions would surface in ways she could not control. What made the situation even more volatile was the involvement of others who were beginning to notice the strange gravity pulling Ava and Delilah into the same orbit. The art world connections surrounding Delilah had already drawn attention from powerful figures in Port Charles, and some of them were beginning to suspect that her arrival was not a coincidence. If anyone uncovered the truth about Ava's connection to her, the consequences would ripple far beyond their personal conflict. Inside Ava's mind, the battle had become brutally clear. She could attempt to protect herself by confronting Delilah directly, risking the possibility that the truth would explode into the open. Or she could move more quietly, manipulating the situation from behind the scenes in order to steer Delilah away from the answers she was seeking. Neither option offered safety. Both required Ava to embrace the darker instincts she had spent years refining. Delilah, meanwhile, was moving in the opposite direction. Her anger had evolved into determination, and every attempt by others to redirect her attention only strengthened her resolve. The more resistance she encountered, the more convinced she became that someone powerful was trying to silence the truth. What she did not yet realize was that the person standing at the center of that hidden war was the very woman whose blood ran through her veins. The tension between them had begun to transform into something inevitable. Ava's need for control and Delilah's hunger for truth were driving both women toward a confrontation neither of them could avoid. Each step forward revealed another layer of betrayal, another secret buried beneath years of manipulation and silence. And as the shadows of Port Charles closed in around them, it became increasingly clear that this conflict was not simply about family or identity. It was about power, about the right to control the narrative of the past, and about the destructive consequences of a decision made long ago in the name of survival. In a city built on secrets, the truth rarely emerged without collateral damage. And the closer Ava and Delilah moved toward the moment when their connection would be exposed, the more certain it became that one of them would have to lose everything. The question was no longer whether the truth would surface. The only question left was how far Ava would go to prevent it, and how much destruction Delilah was willing to unleash in order to finally reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. The deeper Ava moved into the world of high-stakes art deals and quiet alliances, the more she convinced herself that control was still firmly in her hands. For years, she had navigated the delicate ecosystem of Port Charles's elite circles with calculated precision, and her partnership with Sidwell had only strengthened that illusion. Their connection through art had appeared harmless at first, two sophisticated figures drawn together by the beauty, rarity, and power that priceless works could command. Ava had helped Sidwell broker several lucrative art arrangements, introducing him to collectors, smoothing delicate negotiations, and quietly benefiting from the influence such deals created. In the beginning, it had all felt like another strategic victory in the long series of carefully managed moves that defined her life. But what Ava had failed to understand was that every alliance carried consequences that could not always be predicted or contained. The deals she had helped orchestrate for Sidwell were not as clean as they appeared. Beneath the polished surface of gallery exhibitions and private auctions was a darker network of influence, one where stolen pieces, forged provenance records, and silent intimidation often determined who truly controlled the market. Ava had always believed she could move through that world without being consumed by it. She had told herself that she was too intelligent, too cautious, to become entangled in something she could not escape. Yet the past has a way of resurfacing in the most devastating form, and Ava's past carried a wound she had spent years refusing to face. The secret that haunted her was not simply a mistake or a betrayal. It was something far more unforgivable. Somewhere along the twisting chain of decisions that had defined her survival, Ava had played a role in a tragedy she had never fully allowed herself to acknowledge: the death of her own child. Whether it had been an accident born of reckless choices or the unintended consequence of a ruthless plan, the result remained the same. Ava's actions had created the circumstances that destroyed a life she should have protected. For years, she had buried that truth beneath layers of denial and ambition. Success became her shield. Power became her distraction. The carefully curated persona she presented to the world helped keep that unbearable reality locked away. But the recent developments surrounding Sidwell and the mysterious appearance of Delilah were beginning to tear through those defenses. What Ava had once suppressed with ease was now rising back to the surface with terrifying clarity. At first, the signs were subtle moments of distraction during conversations, flashes of unease when certain memories surfaced without warning. Ava found herself replaying fragments of the past she had long refused to examine. The more she tried to dismiss those thoughts, the stronger they returned. Her mind began drawing connections between events she had previously treated as separate incidents. The deals with Sidwell, the arrival of Delilah, the unsettling coincidences surrounding the art world contacts, they were beginning to feel less like isolated developments and more like pieces of a pattern she could no longer ignore. The realization created something far more dangerous than guilt. It created obsession. Ava had always thrived on control, but the resurfacing of her past was dismantling that control piece by piece. The possibility that her old decisions had set off a chain reaction now threatening to expose everything filled her with a kind of panic she had never experienced before. Each new discovery deepened the sense that the life she had constructed was balanced on the edge of collapse. What frightened her most was the idea that the past might not remain buried any longer. If the truth about her child's death resurfaced, it would destroy the carefully managed image she had built. The powerful figure she had become would instantly be replaced by the woman responsible for an unthinkable tragedy. That possibility ignited a storm of anger inside her, not only toward those who might uncover the truth, but toward herself for allowing events to spiral so far beyond her control. At the same time, Ava's relationship with Sidwell had begun to shift in unsettling ways. Where she once saw him as a useful ally, she now sensed something colder beneath his calm exterior. Sidwell understood power, and he understood secrets. If he suspected the truth about Ava's past, he could easily use it as leverage. The thought that she might have unknowingly handed him that power through their shared dealings only intensified the pressure building in her mind. As these fears grew, Ava's thoughts became darker, sharper, more desperate. She began examining every possibility for protecting herself from the consequences that might soon erupt around her. That meant controlling information, manipulating alliances, and, if necessary, eliminating threats before they could reach the truth. The transformation inside her was subtle but undeniable. What had once been careful calculation was evolving into something more frantic and dangerous. Ava was no longer acting solely to maintain her influence. She was fighting to suppress the avalanche of guilt, fear, and rage that threatened to overwhelm her. And beneath all of it lingered the most terrifying realization of all. The past she had tried so desperately to erase was not finished with her. The death she had caused was no longer just a buried memory. It had become the center of a storm that was now circling back toward her life with relentless force. As Ava stood at the edge of that unraveling reality, the obsession consuming her grew stronger by the day. Every decision she made now carried the weight of that hidden truth. Every shadow in Port Charles seemed to whisper the same warning that the secret she had buried for so long was no longer content to remain silent. The woman who once believed she could control every outcome was beginning to realize that the consequences of her past were far more powerful than anything she had ever manipulated. And if those consequences finally erupted into the open, Ava might discover that the only thing more destructive than the truth itself was the madness it had already unleashed inside her.